The galaxy's most secure prison meets its match in a human inmate. Deep in the Andromeda Galaxy, the Bajoran-controlled hexagon cluster houses Zeta-9, a maximum security facility designed to contain the universe's most dangerous criminals. Its reputation for being inescapable is about to be challenged. Edward Coleman, former Earth Special Forces operative turned interstellar smuggler, stands before the imposing gates of Zeta-9. His wrists ache from the quantum-locked restraints as he's roughly pushed forward by his Bajoran guards. The botched heist on their trade outpost has landed him a life sentence, and now he faces the consequences of his actions. The prison's entrance looms, a massive structure of dark metal and pulsing energy fields. Edward's eyes scan the perimeter, noting the absence of windows and the faint shimmer of a temporal stasis field enveloping the complex. As the gates slide open with a low hum, he's greeted by the stern face of Warden Yara. The Bajoran official stands tall, her angular features set in a mask of cold efficiency. "Welcome to Zeta-9, human," she says, her voice carrying a hint of disdain. "You'll find your stay here to be permanent." Edward remains silent as Warden Yara explains the prison's security measures. She speaks of neural inhibitors, designed to suppress any latent abilities inmates might possess, and the quantum-locked cells that adapt to prevent escape. Her words are meant to crush hope, but Edward's mind is already working, analyzing every detail for potential weaknesses. As they move deeper into the facility, Edward observes his fellow inmates. A cacophony of alien languages fills the air, punctuated by the occasional bark of orders from the guards. He notes the diverse array of species, from towering, multi-limbed beings to small, gelatinous creatures confined in specialized containers. One fact becomes clear: he is the only human in sight. Their tour is interrupted by a commotion in the mess hall. Edward watches as a group of guards efficiently subdues a riot, their advanced energy weapons leaving scorch marks on the walls and floor. The display of force is meant to intimidate, but it only serves to fuel Edward's determination. Finally, he's led to his cell. The door seals behind him with a soft click, and he's left alone in the sparse, metallic room. As his eyes adjust to the dim lighting, something catches his attention. A small, almost imperceptible scratch on the wall near his bunk. Upon closer inspection, he realizes it's a message left by a previous occupant. The hidden message hints at a flaw in the prison's supposedly impenetrable security systems. Edward's pulse quickens as he commits the information to memory, his mind already formulating the beginnings of an escape plan. His unique human physiology and extensive military training might just give him the edge he needs. Meanwhile, in her office, Warden Yar receives an urgent communication. The holographic display flickers to life, revealing a high-ranking Bajoran official. "Warden, we have credible intelligence of an impending attack on Zeta-9, the official states, his voice tense. A coalition of alien species is planning to free their imprisoned leaders. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately." As alarms blare throughout the facility and security protocols engage, Edward allows himself a small smile. The coming chaos might provide the perfect cover for his escape attempt. Little do the Bajorans know, their prized correctional system is about to face its greatest challenge yet, a determined human with nothing to lose. In the depths of Zeta-9, as the facility prepares for an external threat, the true danger lies within. Edward Coleman, armed with his wits, training, and the uniquely adaptable nature of humanity, stands ready to prove that no prison is truly inescapable. The game is about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As alarms blared throughout Zeta-9, Edward's eyes narrowed, a plan already forming in his mind. The chaos of the lockdown provided the perfect cover for his first moves. He watched intently as guards rushed past his cell, their attention focused on securing the facility against the impending external threat. Over the next few days, Edward meticulously observed the new patrol patterns and security protocols. He noticed that the guards, now on high alert, were more predictable in their movements, sticking rigidly to their assigned routes. This predictability was a weakness he could exploit. During one of the routine cell checks, Edward seized his opportunity. As a guard entered his cell, Edward feigned a stumble, brushing against the Bajoran's uniform. In that brief moment of contact, His fingers deftly slipped a small security chip from the guard's pocket. The guard, distracted by the lockdown procedures, failed to notice the theft. Once alone, Edward examined his prize. The chip was unremarkable in appearance, but he knew it could be his key to freedom. He located a hidden access panel near his bunk, carefully prying it open to reveal a rudimentary computer terminal. With a deep breath, he inserted the stolen chip. The terminal flickered to life, granting him limited access to the prison's systems. Edward's fingers flew across the holographic interface, sifting through data files with practiced efficiency. Suddenly, a file caught his attention. Subject 137. Escape attempt. Edward's pulse quickened as he delved into the file. Subject 137 had been a human prisoner, just like him. The file detailed an audacious escape attempt that had exploited a weakness in the quantum-locked cells. Though the attempt had ultimately failed, it had led to significant security upgrades throughout Zeta-9. As he read further, Edward uncovered mentions of a flaw in the temporal stasis field surrounding the complex. The file was incomplete, but it hinted at a potential vulnerability that could be exploited. Edward committed every detail to memory before carefully erasing his digital footprints and resealing the access panel. Over the next few days, Edward discreetly reached out to his smuggling contacts using a makeshift communicator he had cobbled together from spare parts in his cell. The device, crude but effective, allowed him to send short, encrypted messages during the brief periods when the prison's communication dampeners fluctuated during security sweeps. His contacts provided him with fragmentary information about Subject 137. The previous escapee had been a former temporal physicist with knowledge of cutting-edge stasis field technology. This information aligned with the weakness hinted at in the prison files, confirming Edward's suspicions about a potential flaw in Zeta-9's defenses. As Warden Yara increased security measures throughout the facility, Edward bided his time, waiting for the right moment to act. His chance came during an emergency drill, when the guards' attention was divided between their regular duties and the simulated threat. Edward slipped out of his cell block, using the skills honed from years of covert operations to avoid detection. He made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of Zeta-9, his every move calculated and precise. Eventually, he reached a restricted area of the prison, one that housed the most dangerous and valuable inmates. It was here that Edward encountered Zix, a member of the enigmatic Whisper Collective. The alien's form was difficult to discern, seeming to shift and blur at the edges. Its eyes, however, were sharp and intelligent, as they regarded Edward with curiosity. A human, Zix's voice whispered directly into Edward's mind. How interesting? Edward tensed, ready for a confrontation, but Zix made no move to alert the guards. Instead, the alien cocked its head, studying Edward intently. You seek escape, Zix continued, its mental voice tinged with amusement. As do I. Perhaps we can be of mutual benefit to each other. Edward considered the offer carefully. An alliance with a telepath could prove invaluable, but it also carried risks. After a moment's deliberation, he nodded. What did you have in mind? As they conversed in hushed tones, Edward learned that Zix's telepathic abilities were partially shielded from the neural inhibitors due to the unique nature of the Whisper Collective's brain structure. This unexpected advantage could provide crucial intelligence for their escape attempt. Together, Edward and Zix began to uncover the darker secrets of Zeta-9. They discovered evidence of corruption within the prison administration, including records of political dissidents and whistleblowers being secretly detained without trial. This information, Edward realized, could be leveraged against the prison authorities if necessary. Their covert explorations led them to a hidden laboratory deep within the restricted zone. The lab was filled with experimental weapons and devices, each more advanced than the last. Edward's eyes were drawn to a particular device, a sleek cylindrical object that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. A temporal distortion generator, Zix whispered in Edward's mind, capable of creating localized disruptions in the flow of time. Edward's mind raced with the possibilities. If they could acquire this device, it might be the key to overcoming the prison's temporal stasis field. However, extracting it from the heavily guarded lab would be no small feat. As they formulated a plan to retrieve the temporal distortion generator, They were approached by a group of draconian inmates. The leader, a hulking reptilian creature named Crag, fixed Edward with a predatory gaze. "We've heard whispers of your escape plan, human," Crag rumbled, his voice low and menacing. "We want in." Edward exchanged a glance with Zix, weighing their options. The draconian's strength could be a valuable asset, but their involvement also increased the risk of discovery. After a tense moment, Edward nodded cautiously. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we do this my way. One wrong move, and the deal's off." As the unlikely alliance took shape, Edward began to refine his escape plan. The impending attack on Zeta 9 would provide the perfect cover for their breakout attempt. With Zix's telepathic abilities, the Draconian's brute strength, and his own strategic mind, they stood a chance of achieving the impossible. Unbeknownst to Edward and his conspirators, Warden Yara sat in her office, her eyes narrowed as she reviewed security footage. Something about the human prisoner's behavior had caught her attention. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but years of experience had honed her instincts. "Computer," she commanded, her voice sharp, "run a full analysis on prisoner Edward Coleman's movements over the past week. Flag any anomalies." As the computer began its analysis, Yara turned her gaze to the window, watching the shimmering temporal stasis field that surrounded Zeta 9. A storm was brewing, both within and without her prison walls, and she was determined to weather it. In the depths of Zeta 9, Edward and his team continued their preparations, unaware that their actions had already drawn the warden's suspicion. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of the galaxy's most secure prison, in the human at the center of it all. The storm that had been brewing within Zeta 9's walls was about to break. Edward's eyes darted between his newfound allies, Zix and Crag, as they huddled in a secluded maintenance corridor. The alarms that had been blaring throughout the facility provided the perfect cover for their hushed conversation. "The temporal distortion generator is our key," Edward whispered, his voice barely audible over the din. "We need to move now, while the guards are distracted by the lockdown and the threat of external attack." Zix's form shimmered slightly as it nodded in agreement. "I can mask our presence from the guards' minds, but only for short periods. We must be swift and precise." Crag's reptilian features twisted into what Edward assumed was a grin. "Swift and precise? Leave that to us Draconians." With a plan in place, the unlikely team set their escape attempt into motion. Edward and Zix slipped away from the group, using the chaos of the lockdown to their advantage. They made their way towards the hidden laboratory, their movements carefully timed to coincide with the shift change. As they approached the lab, Edward's heart raced. He knew that beyond those doors lay their best chance at freedom. Zix's telepathic abilities proved invaluable, allowing them to anticipate the movements of the few remaining guards in the area. Once inside, Edward's eyes widened at the array of advanced technology surrounding them. The temporal distortion generator stood out among the other devices, its sleek cylindrical form pulsing with an otherworldly energy. With practiced efficiency, Edward carefully removed the device from its housing, while Zix kept watch. "We have company," Zix's voice echoed in Edward's mind. "Two guards approaching. We must leave now." Quickly, they concealed the generator within a modified food dispenser that Crag had prepared earlier. They slipped out of the lab just as the guards rounded the corner, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they made their way back to the rendezvous point, Edward's mind raced with the next steps of their plan. They needed to place the device near the prison's power core to maximize its effect on the temporal stasis field. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Edward and Zix pressed themselves against the wall, barely breathing as a group of guards rushed past, led by a stern-faced Bajoran officer. "The warden has ordered a full security sweep," one of the guards announced. "Check every cell, every corridor. She suspects something's amiss." Edward's eyes sharp. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. They needed to act now. As they regrouped with Crag and the others, Edward quickly relayed the new information. "We need to accelerate our timeline," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Crag, can your team create a diversion in the main cell block?" The Draconian nodded, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We'll give you a riot they won't soon forget." As Crag's team moved into position, Edward led the rest of the group towards the power core. They navigated through a maze of maintenance tunnels, narrowly avoiding detection several times. Zix's telepathic warnings proved invaluable, allowing them to duck into hidden alcoves just as guard patrols passed by. Finally, they reached the power core. The massive structure hummed with energy, the very air around it crackling with power. Edward carefully placed the temporal distortion generator near the base of the core, his hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. Just as he finished the final adjustments, a new voice cut through the air. "I thought I might find you here." Edward spun around to see a Bajoran scientist standing at the entrance to the room. His heart sank, expecting to see guards flooding in behind him. Instead, the scientist raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm Dr. Lorne," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I've been watching you, Edward Coleman. I know what you're planning, and I want to help." Edward's eyes narrowed, his body tense and ready for action. "Why should we trust you?" Dr. Lorne's expression hardened. "Because I've seen firsthand the corruption in this place, the unethical experiments, the political prisoners held without trial. I've been working to undermine it from within, but your escape attempt, it could expose everything." A moment of tense silence passed before Edward nodded. "What can you do?" "I can disable the neural inhibitors," Dr. Lorne replied. "It won't last long, but it should give you the edge you need." As Dr. Lorne worked on disabling the inhibitors, the sound of chaos erupted from the main cell block. Craig's diversion was in full swing. Alarms blared with renewed intensity, and the hurried footsteps of guards echoed through the corridors. Edward's team moved swiftly, taking advantage of the confusion. With the neural inhibitors disabled, Zix's telepathic abilities were stronger than ever, allowing them to avoid detection as they made their way towards the hangar bay. As they approached their destination, the first tremors of the external attack shook the facility. Edward knew it was time. He activated the temporal distortion generator, feeling a strange ripple pass through his body as localized fluctuations began to disrupt the stasis field. The hangar bay doors loomed before them, their last obstacle to freedom. Edward took a deep breath, knowing that beyond those doors lay either salvation or capture. With a nod to his team, he prepared to make his final push for liberty, unaware of the Bajoran commandos that awaited them on the other side. The hangar bay doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a chaotic scene of flashing emergency lights and billowing smoke. Edward and his team surged forward, their hearts pounding in their ears as they made a desperate dash for freedom. As they sprinted across the hangar, laser fire erupted from behind them. The Bajoran commandos had anticipated their escape route and were closing in fast. Edward dove behind a stack of cargo crates, pulling Zix down with him as energy bolts sizzled overhead. "Crag!" Edward shouted over the din of battle. "We need cover fire!" The draconian warrior roared in response, his massive frame emerging from behind a nearby shuttle. With inhuman strength, Crag hefted a discarded plasma cutter and unleashed a barrage of superheated energy at their pursuers. The Bajoran troops scattered, momentarily thrown into disarray. Seizing the opportunity, Edward led the group towards a sleek transport ship at the far end of the hangar. Dr. Lorne's fingers flew over the access panel, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. The ship's hatch opened with a soft chime, and the escapees piled in. "Everyone, strap in!" Edward commanded as he slid into the pilot's seat. His hands danced across the controls, bringing the ship's systems online. The engines hummed to life, vibrating through the hull. As the transport lifted off, a final volley of laser fire peppered its exterior. Edward gritted his teeth, pushing the thrusters to their limit. The ship shot forward, bursting through the hangar's atmospheric shield and into the inky blackness of space. Behind them, Zeta 9 grew smaller, its imposing silhouette framed against the backdrop of stars. Edward allowed himself a brief moment of elation before reality set in. They weren't out of danger yet. "Zix, scan for pursuit ships," he ordered, his eyes fixed on the nav console. "Dr. Lorne, see if you can boost our engine output. We need to put as much distance between us and Zeta 9 as possible." As his companions set to work, Edward plotted a course for the nearest hyperspace lane. They needed to disappear, and fast. The stolen temporal distortion generator hummed softly in its improvised housing, a reminder of the technology that had made their escape possible. Hours passed in tense silence as they pushed deeper into neutral space. Finally, Edward allowed himself to relax slightly. They had made it. They were free. "Setting course for the Omega Nebula," he announced, turning to face his unlikely crew. "It's time we find ourselves a new home." The transport ship emerged from hyperspace with a flash of light, the swirling colors of the Omega Nebula filling the view screen. Edward's eyes widened as he took in the sight of Nexus Station, a sprawling construct of metal and light that hung suspended in the cosmic maelstrom. As they approached the station, a crackling transmission came through the ship's comm system. "Unidentified vessel, state your business, and prepare for docking procedures." Edward exchanged glances with his companions before responding. "Nexus Control, this is the Stardust. We're refugees seeking asylum and looking to resupply." There was a pause before the controller replied, "Acknowledged, Stardust. Proceed to Docking Bay 17. Be advised, all newcomers are subject to inspection upon arrival." As they maneuvered towards their assigned bay, Edward could feel the tension radiating from his crew. They had escaped one prison, only to potentially walk into another. But they had no choice. They needed supplies, information, and a place to lay low. The docking procedure went smoothly, and as the airlock hissed open, Edward took a deep breath. "Remember," he said quietly, "we're just refugees, looking for a fresh start. Stay alert, but don't draw attention to yourselves." They stepped out onto the bustling docking platform, immediately engulfed by the sights, sounds, and smells of Nexus Station. Beings of all shapes and sizes hurried past, speaking in a cacophony of languages. The air was thick with the scent of exotic foods and machine oil. A gruff-looking Tellarite official approached, datapad in hand. "Names and species," he grunted, eyeing the group suspiciously. Edward stepped forward, his mind racing to concoct a plausible story. "I'm John Smith, human. This is Zix, a Whisper Collective refugee, Crag, a Draconian merchant, and Dr. Lorne, a Bajoran expatriate." The Tellarite's eyes narrowed at the mention of Bajor, but he simply nodded and made some notes on his datapad. "Welcome to Nexus Station," he said, his tone making it clear the welcome was anything but warm. "You have 40 IKIT hours to register for extended stay or be on your way. Any trouble, and you'll be ejected into space. Clear?" Edward nodded, and the group made their way into the heart of the station. As they walked, Zix's voice echoed in Edward's mind. "Many eyes upon us. Curiosity, suspicion. We must be cautious." They found temporary lodging in the station's lower levels, a cramped set of rooms that smelled faintly of mold. As soon as the door closed behind them, Crag turned to Edward, his reptilian features set in a scowl. "What now, human? We cannot hide here forever." Edward ran a hand through his hair, his mind already formulating plans. "We need information, resources. Crag, you mentioned connections in the Draconian underworld. Can you reach out to them?" Crag nodded slowly. "It may take time, but yes." "Good. Dr. Lorne, I need you to work on modifying our ship. If the Bajorans come looking, we can't be flying around in a stolen prison transport." As his companions set to their tasks, Edward's gaze drifted to the small viewport in their quarters. The swirling colors of the Omega Nebula seemed to mock him with their beauty and chaos. They had achieved the impossible by escaping Zeta 9, but now the real challenge began. A knock at the door startled Edward from his thoughts. He approached cautiously, hand hovering near the concealed weapon at his hip. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with a grizzled human man, his weathered features creased in a knowing smile. "Edward Coleman," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "It's been a long time." Edward's eyes widened in recognition. "Jack Hawkins? What in the seven hells are you doing here?" Jack's smile widened. "Same as you, I'd wager. Trying to stay one step ahead of the law. But that's not important right now. We need to talk, and not here. Meet me at the rusty airlock in an hour. Come alone." Before Edward could respond, Jack melted back into the crowd, leaving him standing in the doorway with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. He turned back to his companions, his mind racing with the possibilities and dangers this unexpected reunion might bring. "Change of plans," he announced. "I think I've found us a way into Nexus Station's underworld, and if I'm right, it might just be the key to our survival in this lawless frontier." Frontier. Edward's mind raced with the possibilities Jack's unexpected appearance had presented. He turned to his team, his expression a mix of grit and caution. "I need to meet with an old contact," he said. "Stay alert and continue our preparations. I'll be back soon." An hour later, Edward found himself in the dimly lit confines of the rusty airlock, a seedy bar tucked away in one of Nexus Station's less reputable sectors. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of alien spirits. He spotted Jack in a corner booth, nursing a glass of amber liquid. As Edward slid into the seat across from him, Jack's weathered face broke into a grin. "Glad you made it, old friend. I hear you've been making waves." Edward's eyes narrowed. "News travels fast." "Faster than you'd think," Jack replied, leaning in. "Listen, I've got a proposition for you, a job that could set you up for life." Before Jack could elaborate, the bar's entrance slammed open. A group of rough-looking Tellarites stormed in, their eyes scanning the room. Edward tensed, his hand instinctively moving towards his concealed weapon. Jack cursed under his breath. "Looks like our reunion's been cut short. Meet me at Docking Bay 42 in 2 hours. Bring your team." With a nod, Edward slipped out through a back exit, his mind already formulating plans for what lay ahead. 2 hours later, Edward and his team stood before a sleek, unmarked ship in Docking Bay 42. Jack emerged from the shadows, flanked by a diverse group of hardened individuals. "Welcome to the big leagues," Jack said, gesturing towards the ship. "We've got a job that requires your unique skill set." As Jack outlined the plan, Edward's eyes widened. This wasn't just any heist. They were going after a high-value Bajoran convoy. The potential payoff was astronomical, but so were the risks. Days of intense preparation followed. Edward's team worked tirelessly, modifying their ship, honing their skills, and studying the convoy's projected route. The plan was daring, bordering on suicidal, but Edward knew it was their ticket to establishing themselves as major players in the Omega Nebula. On the day of the heist, tension crackled through the air like static electricity. Edward's modified ship slipped silently through space, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to Bajoran sensors. As they approached the convoy, Edward's voice came through the comm system, steady and resolute. "Remember your training? Stick to the plan. We've got one shot at this." The next few hours were a blur of precision maneuvers, expertly timed explosions, and heart-stopping moments of near discovery. Craig's raw strength proved invaluable as they boarded the lead ship, while Zix's telepathic abilities allowed them to stay one step ahead of the Bajoran security teams. In the end, they emerged victorious, their ship's hold filled with priceless Bajoran technology and data cores. As they made their escape, leaving the disabled convoy in their wake, Edward allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Their return to Nexus Station was met with a mixture of awe and fear from the other inhabitants. Baron Zalax, the station's enigmatic leader, personally contacted Edward, impressed by their audacious success. "You've proven yourselves to be valuable assets," Zalax's holographic form said, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "I'm granting you a permanent base of operations within the station. Use it wisely." As they settled into their new quarters, Edward wasted no time in beginning to analyze their haul. Among the stolen items, a series of encrypted files caught his attention. Hours of careful decryption revealed a startling discovery: information about a secret Bajoran research facility known as Project Prometheus. Edward's eyes gleamed as he pored over the data. Advanced weaponry, experimental propulsion systems. The potential was staggering. He knew that gaining access to this technology could be the key to staying ahead of their pursuers and carving out a place for themselves in this dangerous new world. But as he shared his findings with the team, tensions began to simmer. Craig, emboldened by their recent success, argued for a more aggressive approach. "We should strike now while the Bajorans are still reeling from our attack," the Draconian growled, his scaled fist clenching. Dr. Lorne, however, expressed reservations. "We must consider the ethical implications," he cautioned. Such power could destabilize the entire sector. As the debate raged on, Edward's attention was drawn to a blinking light on his comm panel. A new encrypted message had arrived, its source unknown. As he began to decode it, he realized that their recent victory was just the beginning. The true challenges and opportunities lay ahead, waiting to be seized in the vast, uncharted expanses of the Omega Nebula. Nebula. Edward's eyes narrowed as he decrypted the message, his mind racing with the implications. The sender was none other than Admiral Toran, a high-ranking Bajoran official who had apparently taken an interest in their recent exploits. "We have a new opportunity," Edward announced to his team, his voice tight with anticipation. "But it's going to be our most dangerous mission yet." He outlined the contents of the message, detailed access codes and intelligence about Project Prometheus, a secret Bajoran research facility hidden deep in the Gamma Quadrant. The potential rewards were immense, but so were the risks. As the team prepared for their daring infiltration, Edward reached out to an old contact, Sarah Connor, a human covert ops specialist with a reputation for getting into the most secure facilities in the galaxy. Her expertise would be crucial for navigating the complex defenses of Project Prometheus. Weeks of intense preparation followed. Dr. Lorne worked tirelessly to integrate the stolen Bajoran tech into their ship's systems, enhancing their cloaking capabilities beyond anything they had previously achieved. Crag and Jack drilled relentlessly, honing their combat skills for the inevitable confrontation with Bajoran security forces. Finally, the day of the operation arrived. As their ship dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates of Project Prometheus, tension crackled through the air like static electricity. Edward's voice came over the comm, steady and focused. "Activate cloaking systems. We're going in hot." The ship shimmered and vanished from sight as they approached the planet's orbit. Edward input Admiral Toran's access codes, holding his breath as they passed through the initial security grid. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the bridge as they slipped through undetected. They deployed in a stealth shuttle, the craft's sleek design a testament to Dr. Lorne's modifications. Sarah's intelligence proved invaluable as she guided them through a labyrinth of underground tunnels, bypassing the main security checkpoints with ease. As they neared the heart of the facility, an unexpected obstacle loomed before them, a shimmering energy barrier that nullified their stealth technology. Edward's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on the temporal distortion device they had stolen from Zeta 9. "Dr. Lorne, can we use the temporal device to create a localized time bubble?" Edward asked urgently. The Bajoran scientist's eyes widened with realization. "Yes, but it's risky. We'd be moving too slowly for their sensors to register, but we'd be vulnerable if anyone physically spots us." "It's a risk we have to take," Edward decided. He activated the device, and the world around them seemed to slow to a crawl. They passed through the barrier, their movements glacial but undetected by the facility's advanced security systems. Once inside, the team split into two groups. Edward led Zix and Sarah towards the main research lab, while Crag, Dr. Lorne, and Jack headed for the power core to plant explosives as a contingency plan. In the research lab, Edward's group discovered a treasure trove of advanced weaponry and propulsion systems. They worked quickly, downloading crucial data and collecting prototype samples. Zix's telepathic abilities provided an early warning system, allowing them to avoid patrolling guards. Meanwhile, Crag's team encountered heavy resistance at the power core. Jack's mercenary skills and Crag's brute strength proved a formidable combination against the Bajoran guards, but they soon found themselves cornered. It was Dr. Lorne who saved the day, using his scientific knowledge to overload the facility's power grid. The resulting blackout gave them the opening they needed to plant the explosives and make their escape. As Edward's group finished gathering intelligence, they stumbled upon a heavily guarded chamber. Inside, they found evidence that chilled them to the core, detailed plans for a joint invasion by the Bajoran Empire and the mysterious Voidwalkers, using the technology developed at Project Prometheus. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility, their presence finally detected. Edward and his team fought their way back to the rendezvous point, using a combination of stolen Bajoran weapons and their own unique abilities. Zix's telepathy proved crucial in anticipating enemy movements, while Sarah's covert ops experience helped them navigate the complex's labyrinthine corridors. In a heart-stopping moment, Edward found himself face-to-face with a squad of elite Bajoran commandos. Outnumbered and outgunned, he relied on his quick thinking and human adaptability. He used the environment to his advantage, improvising weapons and traps that caught the technologically superior force off guard. As they reached their shuttle, a new threat emerged. Warden Yara had arrived with a fleet of Bajoran warships, having tracked them from Nexus Station. With no time to lose, Edward made a bold decision. "Dr. Lorne, can we integrate that prototype propulsion system into our shuttle?" The Bajoran scientist's eyes widened. "It's highly unstable, but yes, I believe we can." As Bajoran forces closed in, Dr. Lorne worked feverishly to install the experimental drive. The shuttle shuddered as the new system came online, raw power surging through its frame. With the Bajoran fleet bearing down on them and the facility's defenses locked onto their position, Edward took the controls. The enhanced shuttle shot forward with incredible speed, outmaneuvering the Bajoran ships with hairpin turns and impossible accelerations. But the prototype drive was never meant for this kind of stress. As they pushed it to its limits, the shuttle began to shake violently, systems overloading and alarms blaring. In an audacious attempt, Edward activated the temporal distortion device one last time. A massive time dilation field engulfed the entire Bajoran fleet, buying them precious seconds to make the jump to hyperspace. The device sparked and died, completely burned out from the strain. They had escaped, but at a terrible cost. The shuttle limped through hyperspace, its systems failing one by one. As emergency power kicked in, Edward realized they were adrift in an uncharted region of space, far from any known safe haven. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, the reality of their situation set in. They had acquired game-changing intelligence and advanced technology, but now found themselves stranded in unknown territory, their enemies undoubtedly regrouping for a massive manhunt. Edward looked around at his battered but unbroken team. They had pulled off the impossible, but their greatest challenges still lay ahead. With limited resources and a damaged ship, they would need all their skills and ingenuity to survive in this hostile galaxy, and to use the information they had gained to stop the Bajoran Voidwalker Alliance before it was too late. Too late. As the gravity of their situation sank in, Edward took a deep breath and surveyed his team. They were battered, exhausted, but alive, and that was something he could work with. "All right, people," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos of the failing systems around them. "We're not out of this yet. Dr. Lorne, what's our status?" The Bajoran scientist's fingers flew over the shuttle's control panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Not good, I'm afraid. We've lost primary power, and life support is running on emergency backups. We've got maybe 48 hours before things get critical." Edward nodded, his mind already racing through potential solutions. "Okay, we need to prioritize. First order of business is getting basic systems back online. Crag, I need you to help Dr. Lorne with repairs. Jack, take inventory of our supplies. Sarah, see if you can boost our long-range scanners. We need to find somewhere to set down and regroup." As the team sprang into action, Edward turned his attention to the stolen Bajoran technology. If they could integrate some of these advanced systems into their shuttle, it might just give them the edge they needed to survive. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. The air grew thick and stale as life support systems struggled to keep up. Just as exhaustion began to set in, Sarah's voice cut through the tense silence. "I've got something," she announced, her eyes fixed on the scanner display. "There's a small space station about 2 light years from our position. It's not showing up on any known star charts." Edward leaned in, studying the readout. "Could be a trap," he mused, "but it's our best shot. Dr. Lorne, can we make it?" The scientist nodded hesitantly. "If we reroute all non-essential power to propulsion, yes, but it'll be close." "Then that's what we'll do," Edward decided. "Everyone, strap in. This could get rough." The journey to the mysterious station pushed their battered shuttle to its limits. Systems flickered and failed, the hull groaned under the strain, but Edward's steady hand at the controls kept them on course. As they approached, the station came into view, a sprawling structure of unfamiliar design, pockmarked with impact craters and drifting silently amidst a dense asteroid field. "No signs of active power or life support," Dr. Lorne reported, scanning the station. "It appears to be abandoned." Edward guided the shuttle into a docking bay, the artificial gravity kicking in as they touched down. "All right, we'll split into 2 teams. Crag, Jack, you're with me. We'll scout ahead. Dr. Lorne, Sarah, Zix, stay here and see what you can do to get our systems back online." The station's interior was a maze of dimly lit corridors and cavernous chambers filled with strange, alien machinery. Edward led his team cautiously, senses alert for any sign of danger. They found no bodies, no signs of conflict, just an eerie, pervasive silence that spoke of long abandonment. In what appeared to be the station's control center, they encountered their first real break. A holographic interface flickered to life as they entered, projecting symbols in an unfamiliar language. "Jack, see if you can make sense of this," Edward ordered. "Crag, keep watch. I'm going to check in with the others." Before he could activate his comm, a crackling voice filled the air. The station's AI struggling to communicate through damaged systems. Its words were a jumble of alien syllables, incomprehensible yet clearly an attempt at interaction. "Dr. Lorne," Edward called over the comm, "we've got a partially functional AI here. Think you and Sarah can work on decoding its language?" "We'll do our best," came the reply. "In the meantime, I've managed to get basic life support running in this section of the station. We should be able to move our operations here while we continue repairs on the shuttle." Over the next few hours, the team worked tirelessly to establish a foothold in their new temporary home. Dr. Lorne and Sarah made steady progress with the AI, gradually gaining access to more of the station's systems. Crag and Jack set up a makeshift security perimeter, while Edward coordinated their efforts and continued to analyze the data they'd stolen from Project Prometheus. Just as things were starting to look up, Edward's comm unit buzzed with an incoming transmission. The encryption was familiar. Baron Zalax. Edward's eyes hardened as he read the message, his mind racing with the implications. "Everyone, gather round," he called, his voice grave. "We've got a new problem." As the team assembled, Edward shared the contents of the Baron's message. Warden Yara had placed an enormous bounty on their heads, turning every mercenary and bounty hunter in the sector into a potential enemy. The Baron offered protection, but at a steep price, exclusive rights to the Prometheus technology. "So, what do we do?" Jack asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Edward's eyes narrowed, a plan already forming. "We negotiate. Baron Zalax wants our tech, but he doesn't know exactly what we have. We offer him a limited sharing agreement, enough to sweeten the deal, but not everything." "And if he refuses?" Crag growled, his scaled hands clenching into fists. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Edward replied. "For now, we need to focus on getting this station fully operational and our shuttle repaired. We're not out of the woods yet." As the team dispersed to their tasks, Edward felt a sudden chill. He turned to see Zix, her luminous eyes wide with alarm. "Edward," she said, her telepathic voice echoing in his mind. "I sense something, a presence, faint but growing stronger. It's coming from a nearby planet." Before Edward could respond, the station's newly activated long-range scanners blared to life. A signal, unmistakably human in origin, pulsed from the surface of a neighboring world. Edward's pulse quickened. A potential ally or a new threat? Either way, it was clear their adventure in this uncharted region of space was just the beginning. "All right, people," he announced, his voice cutting through the sudden buzz of activity. "Looks like we've got a new mission. Let's gear up and find out who else is out here in the middle of nowhere." Nowhere. As Edward finished briefing the team on the new signal, the station's sensors suddenly blared with urgent warnings. Multiple ships were dropping out of hyperspace nearby, Bajoran vessels and an assortment of unmarked craft that could only be bounty hunters. "They've found us," Sarah said grimly, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon. Edward's mind raced. The station was defenseless, and their shuttle was still undergoing repairs. They needed a new plan. Fast. "Everyone, grab what you can," he ordered. "We're evacuating to the planet's surface." As the team scrambled to gather supplies and essential equipment, Edward turned to Dr. Lorne. Doctor, how much of the shuttle's upgrades can we salvage? The Bajoran scientist's fingers flew over a datapad. The propulsion system is integrated into the shuttle's frame, but I can remove the power core and some key components. It won't be pretty, but we might be able to jury-rig something on the planet. Do it, Edward nodded. Crag, help the doctor. Jack, Sarah, secure our weapons and survival gear. Zix, I need you to focus on the planet. Can you sense anything more about that signal or the presence you felt earlier? The alien telepath closed her luminous eyes, concentrating. It's stronger now. There's intelligence down there, and technology, but it's clouded, hard to read clearly. It'll have to do, Edward said. Let's move, people. They made it to the shuttle bay just as the first explosions rocked the station. Through the viewports, Edward could see Bajoran ships opening fire, methodically destroying the abandoned structure's outer sections. With the team aboard and secured, Edward took the controls, guiding their damaged shuttle out of the bay. The ship shuddered and groaned, systems flickering as they pushed it beyond its limits. "Hang on!" Edward called out as they plunged into the planet's atmosphere. The shuttle bucked and shook, threatening to tear itself apart. Edward's hands danced over the controls, coaxing every ounce of performance from the failing craft. They burst through the cloud layer, a dense alien forest stretching out below them. Edward spotted a small clearing and aimed for it, bringing the shuttle down in a controlled crash landing. The impact threw them forward in their restraints, but the makeshift modifications held. As the team stumbled out of the smoking shuttle, Edward quickly assessed their situation. The alien forest loomed around them, filled with strange flora that pulsed with an inner bioluminescence. The air was thick and humid, carrying unfamiliar scents. "Sarah, Jack, secure the perimeter," Edward ordered. "Crag, help Dr. Lorne salvage what you can from the shuttle. Zix, I need you to keep scanning for that signal and any potential threats." As the team set to work, Edward heard the distant rumble of ships entering the atmosphere. Their pursuers weren't far behind. "Listen up," he called out, gathering the team. "We're outgunned and outnumbered, but we have two advantages: this alien environment and our diverse set of skills. We're going to use both to even the odds." Edward quickly outlined his plan, dividing the team into three groups. He would lead the first as a decoy, drawing the main force of the attackers. Sarah and Zix would form the second group, using their covert ops and telepathic abilities to sabotage the enemy from within. Crag and Dr. Lorne would lead the third, focusing on modifying their salvage technology for a daring escape. As they prepared, Commander Mitchell's knowledge proved invaluable. He pointed out certain plants that could be used to create makeshift energy weapons, their sap containing a natural electromagnetic charge that could be weaponized. "These should disrupt their targeting systems," Mitchell explained as they harvested the alien flora. "And if we can rig up a large enough charge, we might be able to create localized EMPs." Edward nodded, his mind already racing with tactical possibilities. "Good work, Commander. Let's put it to use." As the sound of enemy ships grew closer, Edward turned to his team one last time. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our lives here. We're fighting for the future of the galaxy. Whatever happens, we stand together." With determined nods, the team dispersed to their positions. Edward took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership on his shoulders. As he moved into the dense alien forest, he could hear the first Bajoran shuttles touching down nearby. The battle for their freedom and the fate of humanity and all alien species was about to begin.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.